Well, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to a special open council meeting here at the Shaw Auditorium for Thursday, July the 3rd. And I'd like to start by calling the meeting to order and ask for an adoption for the agenda.
Your Worship, I have a request for two additional delegations, that being E.T. Turner and Miss Sandra Turner.
And Miss Sandra Turner, okay.
Yeah.
That's your motion?
That's my motion.
Is there a seconder?
Second, Your Worship.
All
Your
those in
Worship,
favor? Sorry?
Your Worship, an additional one on the late agenda is Mr. Ian Gartshore.
Yes, in addition to Ian,
addition
Mr.
to-
Gartshore is already on here, but
Three.
we
On
still
the
have
late
to
agenda.
introduce him as a late delegation?
Yes, Your Worship.
Okay, so that will be all three then. We'll add Mr. Gartshore, E.T. Turner, and Sandra Turner. And it's been seconded by
Yes.
you, and all those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. And moving down into other business, and I'm sorry, at this point we'll ask for an adoption of the agenda as amended then.
So moved. Second.
Second, all those in favor? And move into item 3, which is other business. And I think we're going to start off with a motion to rescind the motion passed at the 2014 May 5 Committee of the Whole meeting. And I'll turn it over to Councillor Patchy. I believe you want to
Thank
make
you,
a motion.
Worship.
Sir,
I
Your
would
Worship,
like-
Yes.
if
Do
I
we
may
do the
interrupt.
delegations first, or?
You want to do the
I'm just
delegation before
curious.
the motion goes on the floor?
I'm just making a point, Your Worship. I don't know whether you want to consider the delegations part of the motion.
Yes.
Okay, I was going to do the motion and the delegation, but that's fine. Let's do the delegations first then, if everyone's happy with that. So the first delegation, we'll hear them from Mr. Ian Gartshore. You have up to 10 minutes on this one, because it's fewer than 4. Welcome, sir.
Mayor and Council, thank you very much for this opportunity to address you again this evening. I'm very sad to have had our fair city dragged into or involved with or whatever's going on. I'm not quite sure I get the whole picture, and I'm not sure anybody does. All I know is that our fair city has been smacked around in the media, both nationally and internationally, and I'm very sad about that. And I am even more sad about how I understand you have been treated by quite a number of people, mostly outside of this community, over this decision that you made some time ago. I understand that people don't like the decision, and I get that. And maybe it was a wrong decision. But to be treated the way that you have been treated is not appropriate. Some say that you as a council discriminated against Christians. If this is so, then I'm not quite understanding how it is that both the Jehovah's Witnesses and the United Church of Canada had conferences in our civic buildings in the last couple of months. I do not often tell people that I'm an ordained Presbyterian minister. I am. Sadly, many people will distrust me when they learn that I'm a follower of Jesus through some denomination. I do not blame them. Horrible things have been done in the name of Christianity in the last almost 2,000 years. Women have been burned to death. Children and First Nations people have been abused. Less than a century ago, Jewish people and members of the Communist Party and gypsies were killed in Europe in the name of those who were supported by Christians. And of course, this is only a partial list. I believe that a lot of this horror that's been thrust onto you is related to this. I think that the Christian faith, ever since it basically got taken over by the Roman Empire, about 1700 years ago, has then taken what was originally peaceful Christians and used them by state, and I now think corporate power, as well as those who have a lot of hatred, used for those purposes. And I want to be clear. What I have to say here is on my own behalf. I'm not speaking on behalf of any church, denomination, or group. When I first moved back to Nanaimo 20 years ago, I saw frequent letters to the editors of our local newspapers, written by those who were quoting Christian scriptures to condemn homosexuality. I was aghast. As a Christian, I thought, this is not appropriate. So I wrote a letter of my own to one of the papers, and I expressed my belief of this Jesus who walked this planet 2,000 years ago saying we should not judge, instead we should love. And how is it that followers of this same Jesus that I think I'm following could seemingly be doing the opposite of what he instructed? So that's what I wrote. And suddenly those letters stopped. Not because I think that there's no more hatred. I think it's still there, sadly. 13 years ago, I chaired Nanaimo's Ministerial Association. This group had members from both the evangelical churches as well as the mainline churches. It was not always easy, but we, I think, did reasonably well until 9/11 came along. When some members of the ministerial learned that others were actually trying to sit down and have meals with people of the Muslim faith to try and understand what happened, there was a huge divide that happened. What? You're sitting down with people of another faith? And so we fell apart. The drama that has unfolded in our fair city, I believe, is in part a continuation of that divide from 12 years ago, 13 years ago. I think that some people believe that they alone can speak on behalf of the Christian church, and that they can interpret the Bible without understanding its context, historical, political, cultural, language, and other contexts. And so they can use the Bible to judge other people. And I think it's very sad and unfortunate. I believe the original intention of the Council's motion in question was to indicate that the city of Nanaimo is not in favor of giving voice to those who would discriminate against those of homosexual or LGBTQ community. The irony? Evidently, those who would wish to use our city venue to teach their values themselves felt discriminated against. We were trying to prevent discrimination, and now they believe that we're discriminating against them. And it's quite possibly true. Who knows? Yet here's even a bigger irony. The purpose of the emotion was ostensibly to prevent hatred towards some in our community, yet a number of those who have felt wronged have chosen to attack you as elected leaders in our community with utter disrespect and hatred. That's an irony. We're trying to prevent it. It's happening in bigger ways. I hear that one complainer even wished death on one of you. If this is how they treat human beings, other human beings, then perhaps they shouldn't be allowed to be using our facilities. We've certainly got enough hatred in our world without giving them one more venue. But really, how can you stop them as a council? I don't think you can. Council alone can't. The purpose of your motion has failed. That's clear. Now it's up to us as a whole society, all of us, to stand up to those who would bully you and be verbally violent, regardless of their faith, affiliation, philosophy, belief, group, whatever. To do so with them lovingly and firmly, and with the full knowledge that none of us are perfect. A word about those who have claimed to be wronged. If they are representatives of the Christian faith, it is understandable why so many in our society distrust them. In other words, those who believe themselves to have been wronged are only inviting our community to discriminate against them if this is how they choose to behave. And I don't think for 1 minute that all Christians behave this way. But if some do, who speak for the Christian faith, who believe that they do, well, they're only inviting this kind of backlash from you and from others. It's no wonder that Christians are discriminated against in our society after that kind of behavior. So as a follower of Jesus Christ, I want to offer you a sincere apology on how you have been treated. Well, I hardly think you are perfect. And obviously your motion has failed its intention. You are human beings, just as I am human beings, and everyone here is human. Just as worthy of respect, you are just as much as I am, just as much as they are, just as much as those who feel wronged by your motion. And so I want you to know that I'm sorry. I am sorry. And I hope one day, after this hopefully will pass, that you will have it in your heart to understand that Christians are not perfect and that we make horrible mistakes too, just as you, I'm sure, do. And that when you carry on, that you might not understand us all to be people filled with hatred, because we're not. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gortzer. I see no questions. Thank you, sir. The next delegation is E.T. Turner, and you also have up to 10 minutes, ma'am.
Good evening to Mr. Mayor and the Council, and thank you for letting me address you this evening. I appreciate that. I'm E.T. Turner. I'm part of a same-sex married couple. I'm the Vice President of the Vancouver Island Rainbow Association, and most importantly, a citizen of Nanaimo. On May 5th, 2014, you passed a motion which prevented the Chick-fil-A LeaderCast from being held in our publicly owned conference center. You voted with your consciences, which told you that an event with ties to a known anti-LGBT company and speaker was not the type of event that was wanted in Nanaimo. A year ago, the Nanaimo Daily News also attempted to put on this event and learned then that it was not the sort of event the people of Nanaimo wanted here. As an LGBT citizen of Nanaimo, I have always found it to be a welcoming and diverse city. The mayor and council have demonstrated time and again their support for our community. Now you're considering rescinding this motion after intense pressure from a very small minority of Nanaimo's population. And from those who don't reside here.
Please let her speak, please.
And from those who don't reside here but have found it necessary to meddle in local affairs. If you were to conduct an independent professional poll of the citizens of Nanaimo, I think you would find that your initial decision would be supported by the majority. You are allowing yourselves to be bullied by a small but vocal group that utilizes unprofessional and frankly repugnant tactics of personal attacks, thus displaying their values for all to see. Many people are expressing outrage at how you've been treated. But by allowing yourselves to be thus manipulated by such a small minority, you are setting a dangerous precedent for yourselves and this city. I urge you to think about how much this manipulation has already cost you and will cost you in the future if you bow down to this pressure. If Nanaimo is trying to position herself to attract foreign investment and high-tech companies, then they will find such companies value a community that supports and affirms people regardless of sexual orientation. To have a community that is dictated to by a small portion of the religious community would be and should be alarming to such companies and investors. I urge you to be guided by what the majority of your citizenry would find acceptable, positive, and in the best interest of our community, and not to be dictated to by a small extremist group that the majority of local and national citizenry finds disdainful. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I see no questions. Thank you. The next speaker is Sandra Turner. Welcome.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Council, for hearing us. On May 5th, the motion was brought forward to cancel the LeaderCast. This is an event that was sponsored by an American company with a well-known anti-gay stance, who has donated millions to groups that are on the Southern Poverty Law Center's list of hate groups. A small group of locals have objected to the motion, and you as a council worked with this group and I thought came to a mutual understanding. Now you want to rescind this motion. I do worry about the slippery slope you are starting down. If you allow this to happen, what is to prevent other groups in the future from bullying you into changing other motions and decisions made by this city council? I have always appreciated, Mayor and Council, your support of the LGBT community. And I urge you again to vote with your hearts and vote with your conscience. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, that's the only three late delegations that we've had then, and so we'll move on to the motion. And I think, Councillor Patchy, would you like to move that, please?
Yes, difficult as it is. I would like to make the following motion, Your Worship, which is to rescind the motion passed at the May 5, 2014 Committee of the Whole meeting. And if there's a second, I should like to speak to that motion.
Okay. Moved and seconded. Go ahead.
Thank you, Worship. When any of us on this council make a motion, we do so with a certain purpose in mind and a pretty good sense of what the intended goals are. And when I made my May 5th motion at the request of Nanaimo's VERA, that is the Vancouver Island Rainbow Association, the goal was to have the May 9th LeaderCast event cancelled, based on the LGBTQ expressed concerns, with one sponsor and one speaker. A one-off, so to speak. As we now all know, and very painfully so, that intent has been interpreted in a very different manner by people from in and outside our community. And as such, it has defeated the original purpose of my May 5th motion. Corrective action is required, and I'm doing so by way of introducing this motion, while remaining very much aware that the LGBTQ expressed concerns are still very much with us, and they have not disappeared. I hope that all of us together can find it in our hearts to search for solutions that must be found if in the future we should find ourselves in a similar situation, so that we may be better prepared to promote and to protect the inclusivity of all our citizens. Thank you, Worship.
Thank you, Councillor Patchy. Now, I just wanted to make a couple of comments, and then it's moved and seconded. It's out for discussion at this point. There may be other speakers. I just want to say that what is obviously you're aware of is that Council's meeting tonight to decide on rescinding the May 5th motion. And, you know, I think it's... Sorry, did someone say that? I think it's important to point out that originally we tried to clarify the earlier motion that Council did not intend to offend people of any religious faith or belief. However, in retrospect, certainly I recognize now that a formal apology is required. I think it's important to point out that I will shortly be meeting with representatives from all faiths here in Nanaimo to provide an overview of our actions and provide assurances that people of all faiths are indeed welcome in Nanaimo. And my statement, and then I'll turn over, others may wish to make a comment, that my own statement is that we apologize and regret our actions stated in the motion of May 5. The motion was aimed at preventing divisiveness and hate, but instead caused the opposite. We did not intend on curtailing freedom of speech and apologize for any negative comments directed at people of all faiths. Now, anyone else would like to make a comment before we call the question? Okay, the motion has been moved and seconded. All those in favor? Opposed? Councillor Beswick?
Affirmative.
Go ahead, Councillor Beswick. What did he say?
Affirmative.
In favor? Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, thank you very much. The motion is unanimous then. Did you want to make a comment?
I know you'd prefer us not
No,
to.
no. It's a-
But yes, I think I would like to make a comment. Thank you to the speakers this evening. The past 5 weeks since the majority of council passed the motion to cancel the LeaderCast event has been, for all of us, this council, and for our citizens, extremely difficult. I regret that the motion and the resulting vote was misinterpreted to imply that this council has banned Christians from using our city facilities. This could not be further from the truth. We voted to allow all of our citizens the right to be loved and respected within our community. In hindsight, we did not abide by the Charter of Rights and Freedoms for all groups to be able to rent city facilities, and we should not have disallowed this LeaderCast event. Although on an annual basis and a monthly basis, we do rent to people from all religious organizations that use our facility. Thank you to all of our citizens and Christian leaders within our community who've understood that we as councillors only wish to do the right thing for all of our citizens. Much pain has been caused, and I sincerely pray that our city's reputation has not been permanently damaged, and that everyone who has visited our city in the past or planning to do so in the future are fully aware that this council and all our beautiful citizens welcome everyone of all nationalities, sexual or religious orientation. 20 years ago, I was a member of the Economic Development Group of the day who wordsmithed a mission statement that read, "Nanaimo is one of the most livable, desirable, small cities in North America and will forever remain so."
Thank you very much. Now we move into question period on agenda items only.
Your Worship.
Yes.
Was there not supposed to be a notice of motion?
Well,
Councillor Bestwick?
I contacted him by email today, asked if he was going to be making the motion and if he could provide it. Have we heard it? Is anyone on staff?
Your Worship, I understand that's for the July 14th council meeting.
Oh, okay.
Unless I
I
stand
was trying to
corrected.
get that date. I didn't know when it was going to be done, so July 14th, I guess.
As I understand it, Your Worship, it was supposed to be a notice of motion tonight in preparation for our July 14th meeting.
Councillor Bestwick is participating electronically. Perhaps he could comment? Your Worship.
Yeah. Councillor Best?
Absolutely. Hello?
Yeah, go ahead, Bill. Councillor Bestwick, go ahead. You're on.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, indeed, I did forward a notice of motion this morning early regarding the topic LeaderCast cancellation, and I am respectfully providing notice of motion that I will be bringing forward a motion regarding the leadership cancellation in accordance with legislative procedure for the July 14th regular meeting of council.
Okay. Does staff have that now? Yeah. And Councillor Bestwick, maybe if you have a chance to email up so staff gets the correct wording on it. The reception is not bad, but it's a little bit blurry, and that way we'll make sure that what we have is accurate.
Indeed, I did forward this, Mr. Chair, this morning in writing with the date July 14th, the topic, and the context at the time. So I will be forwarding the specific wording prior to next Wednesday.
That'd be great. Thank you. Yeah.
But a notice of motion, you actually have to have the motion read as the notice of motion. I think that's probably the challenge we're having is that when you give a notice of motion, you put the motion forward now to be heard at the next meeting.
Thank you. Then I will be bringing forward for the July 14th meeting the topic of the cancellation of the LeaderCast event May 9th.
May 5th, I believe.
Well, the event was May 9th. It was canceled on May 5th.
Oh, I'm sorry. I see. Yeah. Okay. Is that everyone okay with that? Councillor Councillor Brennan.
Your Worship, as I understand the rules of procedure, a notice of motion is a notice that a particular motion, a specific motion will be made. A notice of motion that only speaks to the general topic is inadequate as a notice to us. So it would be most helpful if council could have the particular motion that will be brought forward, not just the topic. And I think that you'll find that that's what a notice of motion is. I mean, it's quite clear even in the language, a notice of motion, not a notice of topic, but rather a notice of motion. So I would be interested in knowing what that motion is so I can take notice of it.
Do we have the specific phrasing for that motion?
Your Worship, I will be working with Councillor Bestwick, and we can bring that forward for July 14th.
Well, but I think the message that you're hearing now is that...
Yeah.
Go ahead.
What I've been trying to say earlier is that you have to have the motion
To debate.
presented.
Yeah.
No, not to debate tonight, but it has to be presented to
for
the
next
community and to council as a notice of motion that you would then receive at the next meeting.
So,
Mr. Mayor?
yes.
So I would be satisfied if Councillor Bestwick says that he's going to bring a motion forward on the 14th that tells us what his motion is, then that motion would be discussed at the following meeting.
Okay. And just so for clarity, you did not receive that information yet?
No, we received that this morning. Yes,
You
Your
do
Worship.
have the
It's a
actual motion
notice.
that he wants?
It was an email to staff advising that this is a topic.
Not
that-
read it out now?
There is no motion itself. It was a topic that Councillor
Aren't we
Bestwick would like to
saying-
bring forward.
Councillor Brennan, I think you're trying to say to me that you would like to know what the specific motion is.
Yes, and I'm assuming that Councillor Bestwick will not be bringing forward that until July 14th. He would be giving us notice at that time of the actual motion he intends to make, which we would then forward to the following council meeting for discussion of that particular motion. But at this point, all we know is, the only notice we've been given is that Councillor Bestwick wants to talk generally about the topic of the LeaderCast procedure, cancellation.
Your Worship, will work with Councillor Bestick to bring forward a notice of motion to the next council meeting.
Okay.
May I comment, Your Worship, Mr. Chair?
Yeah, go ahead.
A question to staff. Has it not been past practice that the notice of motion would be placed on the agenda for circulation on Thursday prior to the Monday, July 14th meeting, which in this case would be July the 10th, which is when the agenda will go out to the general public and members of council? Is that not past practice, and has that not been procedure?
Just one sec. Yeah.
No, Your Worship, past practice is exactly what we've been talking about, that you would provide a motion as your notice of motion. And I could read the procedures bylaw if you'd like, but I think it's fairly clear that what the intent is that you actually provide the motion, because that provides the notice of intent for the community and for council for the week.
Okay, but just for clarity then, if Councillor Bestwick brings forward the motion in advance of the 24th meeting, and presumably it would be published Thursday afternoon, it could then be introduced on the 24th meeting and then debated at the following meeting? Is that what the intent is? We had all day to put this together, so why is the confusion now?
Your Worship, the intent would be to work with Councillor Bestwick at the next council meeting to present a notice of motion, which would be his exact motion, which you wouldn't debate at that meeting. It would be a notice for the following meeting for you to debate.
Okay. Is Councillor Bestwick, could you hear that? Is that agreeable?
Sure. I'll bring it forward this month, and I will meet all criteria for the legislative requirements that the city operates under. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Brennan, you had nothing further on that one then? So I think that no further comment on that? No, hang on. Now we go into question period. And Gallup try.
Good afternoon. Robert Fuller, 3350 Hammond Bay Road. I just have a few questions. I asked them well over a month ago, and if there's clarification, I wouldn't mind. How much did the VICC lose with this cancellation, and have there been any other cancellations due to this motion that's since been rescinded tonight?
Okay, I think the answer is that we don't have all that information yet, unless staff has a late. We're working on that now, and as soon as it is available, we'll certainly release it. I'm not aware of, other than the VICC, that there's any other issues out there that haven't been dealt with.
Okay, I can ask these questions again when Mr. Bestwick brings up his motion. Okay. So I imagine my other questions are probably pretty moot too. What are the legal costs ensuing from this decision? And is the city and or the VICC being taken to the court system over this decision?
I'm not aware of any litigation at this point, and I don't have all the final figures in, as I mentioned earlier.
Okay, I'll ask them again. Thank you.
Your Worship.
Yeah.
Did the same speaker not ask the question last month what the legal fees have been, or what the legal costs were, or what the settlement was?
You'll have to ask him. I don't recall.
I did, and it would be in the minutes.
Yeah.
And did you not say at that time that you were going to we were going to get that information?
Yes, we will.
For the
Well, we haven't got all the
speaker?
legal fees if there will be some ongoing yet. Is that what you're referring to? Just so I can follow your...
The settlement that was reached with the Nanaimo Daily News specifically?
Yeah, well, yeah, you want to get into this because that's something that we have...
Maybe I can help. Of course, the settlement won't be disclosed. That there's an agreement that we wouldn't disclose that, but the mayor is correct that the legal fees are still ongoing, and we don't have a total fee for that, which we can provide once it's done.
Supplemental then. So an agreement such as that, a confidentiality agreement such as that, would be between the two parties, and it would be mutually agreed. So I do see that one of the representatives of the Nanaimo Daily News is here today. Perhaps we can get him to the podium and ask him if they have any issue with us disclosing that to the public.
You're out of order on that. You know, we have a signed contract.
Discuss releasing that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, but we have an agreement in writing that supersedes that.
Well, it is council's motion, and Councillor McKay was part of that motion, not to disclose it.
But the chair of the meeting last time, when asked the question, said that we would disclose that.
That was regarding legal fees, not...
We'll disclose.
And Your Worship, at the time, just to clarify, the agreement hadn't been finalized with Nanaimo Daily News, so we couldn't have commented on that anyway.
And, you know, contractual obligations aside, anything that we can release outside of agreements, we will do so.
Thank you.
Is that not all part and parcel of legal costs, including settlements made?
Well, the legal portion of it probably would be, yeah. But as
it
I
would
said to you
seem
earlier,
as a taxpayer and a somewhat reluctant supporter of this building that surely, if I'm paying for this, that when I've been told we haven't got it but we'll get back to you, it would seem to me that those figures should be available.
But they're not at this point. And we will release everything when we get a chance that we can legally release everything.
Well, if somebody could possibly look into this, I will bring this up again when Mr.
Great.
Bestwick brings his motion to the
Yeah,
floor.
you mentioned that earlier. I agree.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Gord Fuller, 604 Nickel Street. I just have a few questions here. Now, and perhaps you can correct me, prior to the motion being made on the 5th, did not Coastal Community and the Daily News pull their sponsorship from the event? Prior to the motion?
I don't know.
And then subsequently, did not the Daily News decide that they would sponsor the event by themselves?
Sorry?
to me one would have to ask the Daily News that, or Coastal Community. But they don't vet their decisions through us.
Those are questions for them to answer.
Well, it seems to me that if the sponsorship was pulled and the event was canceled, then there would have been no need to make the motion in the first place. And so I don't know if that happened or not. I was trying to get clarification. Perhaps...
well, Your Worship, those are all parts of the facts of why you enter into negotiations to settle or to go to court. And I don't think that's something that we are in a position to talk about.
Interesting what we can and cannot talk about. Now, with regards to this notice of motion, correct me if I'm wrong, but cannot a councillor, rather than making a notice of motion before the meeting, simply come to the meeting and make a motion? This is what happened with the leader cast. Councillor Pache made that motion at the meeting. There was no notice.
They can.
So Councillor Bestwick really doesn't have to give a notice of motion. He can simply come on July 14th and make the motion.
If he wished to, he could. Yeah, the point is that normally what we do when we do have information and wish to bring forward a motion, as a courtesy to other councillors, we provide a notice of motion, which gives us time to review it and so on. But just like tonight, without advance notice, I think Councillor Pache was the one that moved 2, possibly 3 delegations forward without notice, and that can be done. Sure.
No, and it was just to clarify, because you hear comments in the back when
it can be done.
The debate was going on about the notice of motion. I did understand that, and I just wanted to clarify for the audience that a councillor could actually make a motion without making a notice of motion. Now to the original motion itself, and I really loved what Mr. Gartshore said and the other 2 delegates said. But in a way, I disagree with banning any event, period. And the reason I disagree with that is because if we were forewarned about an event, and if you pay any attention to Facebook, and I'll use this as a silly example, a lot of mention has been, well, what if the KKK wanted to have an event? Well, you know what? If the KKK wanted to have an event, I would say, all the power to you. Go to it. And then I, under my Charter of Rights, would legitimately protest that event, but I would also be there to see the people going into the event who shared those self-same views as the people putting on the event. And I know LeaderCast was a bit different in that it was about one sponsor and one speaker. So I'm hoping that you won't cancel any events, because I know I and others would like to be there to see who shares those viewpoints in this city.
That's valid. Thank you.
Catherine Davis, citizen of Nanaimo. I've got a couple of questions. Who pays your salaries? Is anyone going to answer that? I do know the answer, but the taxpayers pay your salaries. In this instance, I had no idea that there was a settlement. Once again, Nanaimo Council, whose wages are paid by Nanaimo citizens, is not allowing the citizens to know what the mistakes that this council has made. We have a right to know the costs of your mistakes, the costs of injunctions or settlements. Why are we not allowed to know those costs?
Maybe you didn't hear my earlier discussion where I said as soon as we have all those costs together, we will release everything that we can, is what I said earlier.
Staff just said that it's confidential. Are you telling us now that it's not confidential?
Did you not hear? What I said, actually, was that we will release everything that we can once all the figures are together. There may be issues, confidential.
So really, your mistakes can be put in camera or be made confidential, and taxpayers are not allowed to know the cost of your mistakes. Yes?
That's partially true. I think the other point is that the contractual obligation that we have in one particular instance was signed by not only the city, but the other side as well, agreeing to confidentiality. And so we can't breach that because it's not just the city making that decision in isolation. The city made that decision with the other party involved.
So it's an easy way to cover your butts. Basically, going in camera means that the people who make those decisions, those people, the citizens of Nanaimo who don't know who made those mistakes, that's wrong. You're being paid to be accountable to taxpayers. Are you not?
Will release it. Are you not listening to me? We will release all the information we can. We're not going to hide anything. And everything that we're able to release, we will release. And we're not trying to hide or run away from everything. Now, you could continue to the line of questioning, but I think we've answered it. We will provide every bit of information that we're able to provide.
So really, taxpayers pay for your confidentiality when council makes mistakes. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else like to have a...
Good evening, Council. My name is Tim McGrath. I want to speak to the matter of the notice of motion. My memory serves me a little bit on the fuzzy side, but I can recall standing here after talking about with Mr. Anderson making a notice of motion on a Friday afternoon about 4:15 with a large group of anti-incinerator people here. He made a notice of motion, sent it out at 4:15. How come he didn't have to provide the details of the motion? As a matter of fact, that Monday night, I stood here and asked him what that motion was, and he refused to answer until forced to by council. So why is it being different today?
Well, the difference is, to my way of thinking, is that Councillor Bestwick mentioned that he had a motion that he wanted to introduce, and so he provided council with a notice of motion. That's what it was about. Now, he can, as someone else, you've heard it tonight, I'm sure you're just repeating what you've already heard, that people can come forward and make a motion right without any notice. That can be done. Usually the notice of motion is just a courtesy to other council members so they can research the question that's being brought up and be prepared to debate it.
I understand what you're saying. Why wasn't George Anderson required to fill that same commitment on that issue?
You'd have to ask George Anderson about that, because that's tonight's agenda doesn't involve that.
This is apparently what Mr. Swaby...
I can't speak for George Anderson.
I can...
Sure.
I think what the mayor was saying is that just like George Anderson did, which I can't remember exactly the facts, Councillor Bestwick or any councillor could do exactly the same thing as Councillor Anderson did, and if council accepted it, they would have the motion on the floor. Tonight's request was for a notice of motion, and we were just clarifying the rules around a notice of motion.
Why were those rules not enforced when Mr. Anderson made the question?
Because council accepted the motion.
Yep.
Okay, so it's
go ahead.
So the notice of motion
she had a question for you?
No, I don't have a question, but there are two ways to get a motion on the floor. A motion is always in order. The second way is to give your colleagues a notice that you're going to do a motion. Mm-hmm. So, in Councillor Anderson's case, he made a motion, which is always in order. But
he made a notice of motion?
No, he did not. He made a motion. So if he had wanted to give extra notice to his colleagues, he would have done what Councillor Bestwick attempted to do tonight, and that was give us notice that he was going to do it. But he didn't have to give us notice. He could have made it tonight.
Mr. Mayor, did he not send out a letter to City Council at around 4:15 on the Friday night saying that he was going to bring a motion, and he did not provide the details of the motion at the time?
He didn't have to, as I noted to you.
What makes it different if he didn't have to?
The difference is he didn't have to, and neither did Councillor Bestwick. That's what you must understand, is that a motion is always in order. A motion is always in order.
If he gives advance notice...
But Councillor Bestwick wanted to give advance notice. And I said, if you want to give advance notice, please tell us what the motion is that you're giving us advance
Mr.
notice.
Mayor, did Mr. Anderson send out an email that Friday night?
Yes, he did.
Mr. Anderson, Councillor Anderson.
Yes. Yes.
Did he send
Your
one
Worship-
out at
Your Worship,
4:15 that night?
I can work with the delegation tomorrow
Yeah,
to try and
please,
explain.
I don't
It's-
understand.
It's actually kind of I don't really understand the discussion because the discussion is really when you're able to bring forward a motion, and it's been clarified you can bring forward a motion anytime you like.
Thank you. You want to work with staff?
I would be willing to work with staff on
Thank
it, and we can report back to council on the result.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Councillor Kip.
I'm not the only one asking the question,
me?
that's why.
Yeah, you are.
Excuse me? I wanted to just say that the notice of motion is just to give your council peers a consideration that it's coming forward.
Yep.
And that you have it. With Councillor Bestwick, what he wrote through tonight is he wants to talk about LeaderCast and the legislative ability to bring it to the table. He didn't prepare all of the verbiage in his motion. So and that's just a consideration. People can arrive at the table with a motion that night, and if
Yep.
council accepts
Understood.
it, or you can vote against it if you don't have enough information, but it's the ability. And I think what we're trying to do is to try and make things a little clearer, to try and give notice of motion so the public and ourselves have actual time to prepare so we don't put our foot in our mouth and act like...
Agreed. I understand that. And my question is Mr. Anderson did the same, and he's not held to the
He
same
just
standard.
didn't give us that consideration at that point, but he has on other occasions given us notice. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
Now,
Good evening, Pam Agnew, 6529 Groveland Drive. I'm not here to weigh the merits for or against. I just don't want to see us in this position again. And I'm pleased to hear that you're going to consider different ways of how you're going to bring notice of motion in the future. But really, we need to see more. The issue with any crisis management is you have to deal with it, you put out the fire, but most importantly, we make sure it never happens again. And if anything comes out of it, I think we need some very concrete steps, some very concrete policy. And I'm terribly sad that we have spent $100,000 on corporate governance gurus who couldn't help you out of this box. Because we have failed. They have failed, but we have all failed. And it's got to stop.
well, it's a valid point. I won't dispute it for a minute. But I would like to simply say that I think the outcome, if there is anything positive about this unfortunate incident, is that we as a council are very cognizant now about making decisions that involve facilities, and we're actually going to sit down and review the contract that exists between the city and Adlific to make sure that the verbiage is and the wording is in there, that we can make sure we won't make that same mistake again. And I think we've all learned something from it, sad as it is, and hopefully it will never be repeated again. I appreciate your thoughts on that.
The question, though, still for me is, what are we going to do? We need to have checklists. We need to have staff accountable that they are providing the documentation before you that shows clearly that all constituents who are impacted by any potential decision, that it's literally, we do it in corporations, we do it in legal firms. My next question is, do we have a lawyer on staff?
Not on staff. We have one on contract that we deal with.
Because certain things just are common knowledge that you're going close to human rights issues, to Charter of Rights issues, to just bad contract law. This was ostensibly contract law, the simplest. We all enter into those in our daily lives. It was pretty much that simple. And then it became worse and compounded. We need checklists. As simple as those are, they work. It shows that staff have provided everything that council needs to make an informed decision. It means that every councillor sits with a checklist that says, have we checked the constituents? What is the worst possible outcome on the opposite side of things? Are we navigating a middle road? Are we doing it in the best interests of all? And most importantly, are we doing this as honest Canadians? And I want to know that there's a greater commitment than just, we've all learned from this. I really want to see some concrete steps. We all live in the city. We all love this city.
Could you face us when you're talking, because we're the person you're talking to? When you turn, we can't hear your voice. Sorry.
Okay. We all love this city. We all care about the city, and we all care about everybody in the city. But when we don't demonstrate that in our decisions out of our city, it's a problem.
Great.
And I really encourage the release of all that financial information. I understand that you're all at risk individually for negligent suits, and certainly any citizen would be quite able to take a case against you to find you to pay personally for those funds that you have settled with the Nanaimo Daily News or any other person. So
I'm
please,
not sure that's
let's
accurate,
fix,
but
let's fix
if
this.
you're making legal statements, we can't debate that.
And I'm fine with that.
Are you a
But
lawyer?
what I'm saying,
Are you a lawyer?
no, I have legal training,
Okay.
but
No,
I've
I'm
got
just-
a
I just
legal
wonder if you
opinion
were.
on it.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, I'm not trying to be facetious. I just wondered.
No, no, no.
You
And
spoke very
no,
well,
I'm
and I
not-
just thought you might be a lawyer. That was all.
no.
Anyway,
Other
I can only
qualifications?
repeat what we've said. I think staff and council as a group will certainly look at how we've done things and how we'll change it in the future for sure.
Because it's a pattern, and this is kind of the worst that we've seen. But if we look back on a lot of decisions that have surprised the citizens, caused mistrust, it all starts with a lack of confidence that there was full information available to council to make those decisions. We respect you as individuals, you're capable of independent thought, but when we see stuff being done
Okay, we've got your
without
point.
that, thank
you. Councillor Cade for the delegation.
I just wanted to make a statement to the delegation,
Okay.
Mr. Chair.
Did you want her down, or do you
No,
want to
that's
speak from
fine.
here?
Ms. Agnew, thank you very much for your words. And I couldn't agree more that right now is the time for us to be celebrating where we live, celebrating our neighbors, and telling the world that we're an inclusive and very kind and gentle community. In addition to which, we need to take this time over the next few months for the community to heal.
Cool.
Thank you.
Good point. Okay. And you seconded it? We stand adjourned. Thank you very much.